Trump just threatened Putin with serious consequences if he refuses this ceasefire deal, and Putin's response could trigger World War III. If you thought the Russia-Ukraine war couldn't escalate further, think again. In the past few days, the U.S. has stepped directly into the fight, with Trump set to personally meet Putin in Alaska. This isn't just another round of diplomacy. What happens behind those closed doors could decide whether we move toward peace or stumble into a direct U.S.-Russia clash. Here's what went down. White House Press Secretary Ravit revealed that America has sufficient means and measures to pressure Russia into accepting a ceasefire. But Trump himself struck a very different tone. He insists that diplomacy must come first, framing this Alaska summit as the best shot at halting the bloodshed. Then came the twist. Hours after Ravit's remarks, Putin fired back, accusing Washington of lacking any sincere effort to resolve the Ukraine crisis. And just before flying to Alaska, Trump made his position crystal clear. Standing at a press conference, he declared, "If I were not president, Putin would have already occupied the whole of Ukraine." He went further, suggesting that his personal mediation is the only thing preventing Russia from advancing deeper into Ukraine. In other words, Trump is casting himself as the sole barrier between Putin and outright victory. But here's the real turning point. In Washington, Trump openly threatened Putin on live television. Accept a ceasefire or face very serious consequences. Imagine the U.S. president issuing ultimatums to the leader of the world's largest nuclear arsenal while the cameras are rolling. The message was unmistakable. If the Alaska talks collapse, the Russia-Ukraine conflict may no longer remain limited to Eastern Europe. We could be staring at the first direct U.S.-Russia confrontation in decades. Here's the shocking part. Trump himself already predicted the outcome. He claimed Putin would accept his proposal and agree to a ceasefire. But there's a catch. If Ukraine refuses to cooperate, the entire Alaska summit could collapse, and insiders put that risk at nearly 25%. The Kremlin's position is clear. No ceasefire unless Ukraine formally recognizes Russia's control over Crimea and the 4 eastern regions. In return, Putin has hinted at pulling back from Sumy and Kharkiv. But President Zelensky's stance couldn't be more different. He has vowed never to surrender land, warning that handing over Crimea in the east would put Ukraine's survival in jeopardy. That's why he refuses to bend, and why the conflict remains deadlocked. Here's where it gets even more dramatic. Despite Ukraine being at the center of this war, Zelensky wasn't even invited to the U.S.-Russia talks. That means the future of his country could be decided without him in the room. And if Ukraine refuses to follow America's lead afterward, Washington and Moscow might join forces to pressure Kiev into compliance, while Europe stays silent. The writing on the wall is brutal. Once the Alaska talks conclude, Ukraine may be forced into a compromise, possibly ceding Crimea and the east to Russia. And just as Zelensky reaffirmed on social media that Ukraine would never surrender its land, Trump issued his own warning. If Zelensky dares to trade territory for peace, the U.S. will punish Ukraine with severe consequences. So think about that. If Ukraine refuses to yield, the war drags on. If Ukraine compromises, it risks losing not just land, but America's support. Either way, Zelensky faces a nightmare, standing alone against Russia, abandoned by allies, and crushed between 2 superpowers. What do you think Putin will do? Accept Trump's ultimatum, or risk everything on his next move? Drop your prediction in the comments below, and make sure you're subscribed because this story is far from over.